In this video, we're going to be looking at the different biome map choices you have when using Teragon. There are different biome maps that you can use, which all give you a different effect for the biomes on your map. We're going to start with Create Environmental Biome Map. This map creates a biome map based on elevations. This lets you set, for example, snow at the tops of mountains, or sand at the lower elevations near water. You can adjust these biomes in any way you want and at any elevations that you want. Here you can see the parameters for this command. The top is mostly just left alone, although you can change seed if you want to get different outcomes when you generate the map. The main things you want to look at when changing the biomes is this lower section here. Diffuse biome transitions break up the edges of biomes so they're not hard lines. As you can see in this screenshot comparison, this one has no biome diffusion. Everything's a very clear, hard line as you look around. In these other ones, depending on what diffusion range you're using, you can see that it fades out between forest and desert. This can make a more realistic looking transition between the biomes. However, it can also lead to flickering as the lighting changes between biomes if you're going between a light colored biome and a dark colored biome, such as between burnt forest and snowy forest. So you can enable that or disable that depending what you prefer. Diffusion range will be how many meters of distance that diffusion uses. So the larger the number, the longer it takes to fade out. The smaller the number, the quicker it fades out. Below that are your max elevations for each biome that you want to use. The heights are the maximum height for that biome, and you should always have the max height on the very last one, either 255 or 256. 255 is technically the highest number you should be using. The default presets do use 256, and it shows you a red box as an error message because of that, but it doesn't matter. It works either way, so you can just ignore that warning. The way this works is this first one, which we have chosen desert, has a max height of 30. So that means every elevation between 0 and 30 will be desert. The next one, max height 55, means everything between 30 and 55 is going to be forest. The same thing here, everything between 55 and 80 will be burnt forest. This uses burnt forest twice. What that does is it just limits which biomes you're using. So in this case, you see there's no wasteland biome. So in this case, both of these are 80, so it's still 55 to 80. If the second one was something like 100, then burnt forest would be from 55 to 100, even though this one says 80, because it's still going up to the burnt forest here. And then the last one will be from 80 to 256 as snowy forest. You can change these elevations based on your map to get the biome layout that you want, and you can change the biomes into whatever order you want and use whichever biomes you want to use. You can also use an old biome map, which is optional. This works by creating a different biome map, such as a noise biome map, which we'll be discussing, and then placing this on top of that. When you do, the old biome map name that you create should be something different than what you're using here. In this case, we use my biome map, which is what the default presets use for the normal map name. If you used a second biome map, it would have to be called something else. So when you created that biome map, it should be something other than my biome map. And then that's what you put in here. If you do use this, then when you go here, you're going to go and click on Old Biome Map. That means that in this example, 0 to 30 will use whatever biomes are used in that old biome map. It won't replace them. But the other ones here, since they don't say Old Biome Map, would then use the new biome map. The reason you might choose to do this is if you want to use noise biomes, but you still want snow on the top of your mountains, you could create that noise biome map And then you could turn off all of these by setting them to old biome map, leaving only snowy forest. And that means that the old biome maps biomes will be used up until elevation 80, and then it will be replaced with snowy forest between 80 and 256. If we look at 2D preview, you can see what we've got here. You see the mountains with the snowy peaks fading down through burnt forest, then regular forest, and then desert. This gives you the effect of snowy mountains while still having desert at the lowlands, and then a mix of forest and burnt forest above that. You can add wasteland if you want. You can remove other biomes that you don't want and change elevations depending on what you're looking for your map. The next biome command we're going to look at is create directional environmental biome map. This is similar to the environmental biome map in that it uses biomes by elevation, but it also lets you set biomes based on direction. This can allow you to create snow in the northern part of the map and desert in the southern part of the map if you wanted to do some kind of a layout like that, while still letting mountains have snowy peaks. The lower section here is what's different from the other biome map commands. You start out with this choice here. None would work just like regular environmental biome maps using just this first column of elevations. North and south will have the biomes change in a north to south direction. East and west will have them change in an east to west direction. And center to edge will have them change from the center of the map outward. Random will just randomly choose one of these when you generate your map. Other than when you're using none, both of these sets of height limits are going to be used. The first limit, if you look up here, in this example, north is position A and south is position B. What that means is at the north end of your map, these are the elevations for each biome that you're using. So at the north end of the map, the only biome that you're going to see is snowy forest, with all of these being 0. Position B is the south. So at the very south edge of your map, these are the biomes that are used at these elevations. So wasteland from 0 to 41, desert 41 to 70, and so on. What this does is it will create those biomes at north end and south end of the map, and then between those biomes are going to change between those values. So around the middle of the map, the wasteland is going to end up being around 0 to 20. Desert will be somewhere around 20 to 35 because these are just going to go down in slope. If you do change the slope multiplier to something other than 1, then you're going to get a different slope and it will either go down faster or slower. Changing this can make the numbers that you see here not line up at the exact edges of the map. It can either push those values off the edge of the map or closer to the center of the map because the slope changes faster or slower. Mostly you can use slope multiplier alone unless you are trying to change that slope. Using these values, if we look at the 2D preview, you can see the north end of the map is all snow. And then as you get to the southern end of the map, we have a mix of the wasteland, desert, forest, burnt forest. You'll also see that even though there are mountains in the south, you don't really start seeing snow until you start getting further north. That's because the snow is fading out as you get towards the south. It doesn't have as much elevation at the very south end. We only have snow from 225 to 256. So you do see snow peaks fading out as you get further south, which may be the effect that you're trying to get. You'll also tend to see bands of biomes like this. This will depend on how flat your map is. The flatter it is, the more likely you'll see these bands as you go further south. If it's rougher, you start seeing fewer bands and you get more of this pattern based on elevation. Keep in mind that this command is especially difficult to get the patterns the way you want. It will require a lot of trial and error to get what you're looking for. If we did change this to one of the other ones like east and west, then instead of going north and south like this, the snow would be on the east side here, and then it would fade to the left instead of fading down like this. The next biome map we're going to look at is Create Noise Biome Map. This is a biome map that's going to be somewhat similar to RWG. This creates biomes based on a noise biome map format, which includes different areas of biome that can be different sizes and shapes. I'm not going to go through all these settings because there's a lot to go through and it'll make the video too long. But you can look at the side here, and the majority of these settings do have different screenshots to show what the differences are based on your settings. So I recommend that if you're using noise biome maps, you look through this and adjust those settings depending on what you're looking for. The one thing I will mention is this bottom section here, biome preference. This lets you increase or decrease the chances of a biome being bigger or smaller. This is not exactly the same as weighting. So if you make burnt forest 2 and everything else 1, it doesn't guarantee you're going to have 2 times burnt forest compared to the other ones. However, it does increase that likelihood. So by adjusting these based on which you prefer, there's a better chance that your map will have the ratio of biomes that you're looking for. If we look at the 2D preview, you can see that we have different biomes laid out around the map. These are all different sizes and shapes. Depending on your parameters that you use, these could be bigger or smaller, or a wide variety of different shapes. If you do want bigger biomes, you can reduce the frequency, and if you want smaller biomes, you can increase the frequency. So with RWG, you normally have one section for each biome. In this case, you can see we have multiple sections for forest, a couple for burnt forest, a couple for wasteland. By changing frequency, by lowering it, you can make it so that you have fewer sections, larger sections, so that it's more close to what you get with RWG. If you prefer to have a more varied look like this, then you can use a higher frequency. The next biome map we're going to look at is Create Directional Biome Map. Similar to the Create Directional Environmental Biome Map command, this command gives you a directional layout for your biomes, but does not include the environmental part, which means it does not change based on the elevation. It will only change based on the direction. There are different types you can choose from: stripes, east, west, or north, south, circles, asteroid, diagonal curved, pie chart with center biome. The pie chart with center biome is going to be similar to the RWG format with the forest in the middle and biomes are on the edge, although you don't have to have forest in the middle when you make the map with this. Angular offset lets you just change the angle that these are laid out in. Mostly you can leave that 0 unless you just want to adjust those layouts a bit. These values here are weighting, which means the way you have it set up right now, you have 20% burnt forest, 20% desert, and so on. Everything the same weight, which means as you look at your map, you're going to have an equal size for each biome. These do not have to add up to 100%, but it will take a ratio of them based on whatever it does add up to. So if you had changed burnt forest to 100 and left the others 20, these still won't be 20%, and this 100%, the burnt forest will end up being 5 times the size of the other 4. The rest of this is similar to the other biome commands, and you can look at that and read the help texts on it to get more information about that. Default biome lets you choose whichever biome is used if no biome is generated in an area. For example, if you use circles, depending on how it's set up, you may have corners of your map that don't have any biomes. So when you set the default biome, that's what's going to fill in those corners. If we look at 2D preview, you can see we've got this one, which is stripes left to right. And you can see that they are roughly the same size. Keep in mind that the area that's water is also part of that size of biome. So even though it looks like the burnt forest is smaller, if you think about the water being part of that, it's the same size as the other ones. Same with wasteland on this side. And again, this is based only on direction. With the parameters, you can increase or decrease how variable the edge is. You can have a perfectly straight line if you want, or you can have it even more rough than what you see here. These next two commands are different from the other biome map commands. These commands will adjust your biome map from what you have already created. So you still need to use one of the previous biome map commands when creating your map. And then you can use either of these two new commands to modify that in some way. The first one we're going to look at is fill altitude with biome. This will change your biome map to use a specific biome that you want between the altitudes that you have set. So for example, I've got snowy forest between 100 and 255 meters. That means that any part of the map that is between those elevations will become snowy forest. You can also have this somewhere in the middle. You could say between 100 and 150. You want to be snowy forest, and then leave the rest alone if you want to do that as well. You can restrict the area to a rectangular area if you don't want the entire map to use this. The default values you see here cover the entire map. It's just using math to determine the world sizes. If we look at the 2D preview, you can see what we looked at earlier, and you can see that we now have snowy mountains around the map, whilst we still have the original stripe pattern for the biomes. This can work similar to using the old biome map option that we talked about earlier, but in a simpler form. The last command we'll look at is fill area with biome. This will flood a specific area with a biome that you choose. So in this case, I've chosen wasteland. Offset is how many blocks high you want to do from the point that you choose here with position. So when you're using this command, you're normally going to be filling in a depression. So you would point at the bottom of that depression, and then this number of meters above it will be filled with that biome. To do that, you want to make sure height limiting is on, which means it will stop filling at that limit that you set. If it's water limiting, it will stop changing the biome when it hits water. Using these values, we look at this 2D preview, and originally everything was desert, and then I added the wasteland just to the center of this crater. If I increase the value of offset, it would fill in further and further up the crater. If it's too high of a number, it's going to overflow the crater and fill up the rest of the map, up to whatever elevation that turns out to be. Note that offset is not the actual elevation, it's how many meters above the point that you chose for position. If I had a river going through the center of this, and my position was on one side of that river, and I turned on water limiting, it'd only fill up the biome on that side of the river, and not on the other side of the river. This command is most useful for doing things like craters, or if you want to have something like sandy beaches around a lake somewhere that is currently using some other biome around that, you can use this to fill in those depressions. Note that turning off height limiting will end up filling your entire map. These are your main biome commands that you would use when making biome maps. You would normally use only one biome map command, and then optionally use either fill altitude or fill area with biome. However, like I mentioned, you can use the old biome map option if you're using create environmental biome map to use an old biome map in addition to replacing part of it with this command. Most of the default presets do have at least 2 different biome commands listed, with only one of them that's enabled. The other ones will be disabled like this one is. That's okay. That just makes it easier to switch between them without having to re-add them to your list. But normally you would only have one enabled, with optionally one of these. In addition to doing the biome map commands in Teragon, you can also create your own by editing any biome map that Teragon has created for you within any image editor. Even MS Paint will work with that if you don't have a better image editor. Keep in mind that if you're creating your own biome map or editing an existing biome map, you have to use the exact colors that the game uses for those biomes. So if we look at import biome map, you can see that I've listed out the colors for you. These are the red, green, blue, or RGB values. So when you're editing the colors, you need to make sure that the colors use these exact numbers. They can't use even one digit off or they will not work. The best way to do that if you're editing an existing biome map is to copy an existing color from somewhere else on the map, which you can do with the eyedropper tool that most image editors are going to have. And then you can draw that or fill that somewhere else on the biome map. Otherwise, just change the colors to match what you see here. As long as you do that and save it, the game will then use those biome maps that you've set up, even though it's not been created with Teragon or with the game itself. Just as a word of warning, changing the biome map after you've already created a game will end up messing up the biomes in your game. You may end up with forest decorations, like forest trees and grass, inside the desert. We may have desert cactus inside the wasteland, things like that. So always change your biome map before you create a new save, and then when you load that save, it's going to use the new biome map. If you need any help with biome maps or anything else with Teragon, please check out the chat and help channel on Teragon's Discord, and someone will be able to help you.